As I trudged down the desolate, dimly lit street, the eerie silence of the night hung heavy around me. The city that was usually teeming with life was now cloaked in darkness. The street lamps flickered like dying fireflies, casting eerie, elongated shadows that danced menacingly on the pavement. My heart raced as the distant echoes of my footsteps amplified the sense of isolation. It was one of those nights when I had to work late at the office, and I found myself reluctantly making the long trek home alone. My footsteps were hesitant, and every rustle of leaves in the wind made me jump. A frigid breeze sent shivers down my spine, making me pull my coat tighter around me. I knew I had to keep walking, but an uneasy feeling gnawed at me from within. It was a sensation I couldn't shake off, like an impending doom lurking just around the corner. As I turned onto an even darker, narrower street, my unease deepened. The dimly lit alley was lined with tall, decrepit buildings that loomed over me like ancient monoliths. Broken windows stared at me like hollow eyes, and graffiti-covered walls told stories of a neighborhood long forgotten. I quickened my pace, the echoes of my own footsteps becoming a haunting symphony. And then I heard it, an unsettling, faint whisper that seemed to come from the shadows themselves. My heart leaped into my throat, and I stopped dead in my tracks, straining my ears to listen. It was as if the very air around me had turned malevolent, and the whispering grew louder. "Come closer," it beckoned, a chorus of voices that chilled my bones. "We've been waiting for you." I knew I should have turned and run, but a morbid curiosity took hold of me. Against my better judgment, I ventured further into the gloomy alley, my heart pounding like a drum in my chest. Around a corner, I stumbled upon a gruesome sight that made my blood turn to ice. A circle of hooded figures, their faces obscured by shadows, stood in the center. In their midst lay a grotesque tableau, a mutilated corpse, its limbs splayed out in a grotesque parody of a star. Blood painted sinister symbols on the cobblestone ground. Panic surged through me, and I attempted to backtrack silently. But one of them, the apparent leader, stepped forward, fixing me with dark, soulless eyes. "You've seen too much," he said, voice dripping with malice. I tried to flee, but my legs refused to cooperate, as if they were rooted to the spot. The figures closed in around me, their whispers growing louder and more disturbing. I could feel their cold breath on my neck, and the stench of death enveloped me. In desperation, I screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the oppressive darkness. Their hands reached out, their fingers like icy talons, and I felt their grip closing around me. It was as though I was being pulled into the abyss itself. Just when I thought all was lost, a blinding light pierced through the darkness, causing the hooded figures to recoil in agony. It was a patrol car, its siren wailing, and its headlights cutting through the night like a beacon of salvation. The figures scattered into the shadows, their malevolent whispers fading into nothingness. The police officers rushed to my side, their faces etched with concern. They took my statement, but as I tried to describe the hooded figures, I realized how impossible it sounded. Who would believe such a story? They escorted me home, reassuring me that they would investigate the alley. But as I lay in bed that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that those hooded figures were still out there, lurking in the darkness, waiting for another unsuspecting soul to stumble into their macabre ritual. I learned a valuable lesson that night. Some paths are best left untraveled, and some secrets are better left undiscovered. As for me, I will never walk home alone at night again, for I know that in the shadows, something sinister and malevolent lurks, just waiting for the chance to claim its next victim. A month had passed since that chilling encounter in the dark alley, but the horrors of that night still haunted my every thought. I had become a prisoner of my own fear, rarely venturing out after dark and spending my nights in fitful, sleepless anxiety. But even in the safety of my home, I couldn't escape the feeling of being watched. As the days grew shorter and the nights longer, my apprehension only deepened. I had become consumed by paranoia. seeing sinister faces in the shadows, hearing whispers in the wind. My friends and family grew increasingly concerned, but I couldn't bring myself to tell them the truth. Who would believe me? It sounded like the ramblings of a madman. One fateful evening, as I sat alone in my dimly lit living room, a sharp knock at the door shattered my fragile peace. My heart leapt into my throat, and I cautiously approached the door, peering through the peephole. It was a delivery person, holding a small package. Reluctantly, I opened the door and took the package. It was wrapped in plain brown paper with no return address. My hands trembling, I tore it open, revealing a blood-stained piece of parchment. On it was a chilling message written in a spidery script. You thought you could escape us, but we are always watching. Your time is running out. Fear gripped me like a vice, and I felt a sense of dread I had never known before. How had they found me? How did they know where I lived? I decided to confide in my closest friend, Sarah, who had been the most worried about my deteriorating mental state. As I recounted the events of that night in the alley, her face grew pale, and her eyes widened with disbelief. But then, something in her expression shifted, and she hesitated before finally speaking. I need to tell you something, she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't want to say anything before, but I think you need to know. My heart raced as I listened intently. Sarah went on to reveal a shocking revelation that left me speechless. She had been involved with a secretive group, one that dabbled in the occult and performed rituals in abandoned places. She had introduced me to them once, though I had been completely unaware of their sinister activities. They call themselves the Eldritch Covenant, Sarah confessed, her voice trembling. I left the group shortly after that night in the alley, but they are not the type to let someone go easily. My mind reeled as I processed this information. The hooded figures I had encountered that night were part of the very group that Sarah had introduced me to. It was clear they believed I knew too much, and they were determined to silence me. With newfound determination, Sarah and I devised a plan to confront the Eldritch Covenant and put an end to their reign of terror. Armed with knowledge of their rituals and secret meeting places, we ventured into the dark underbelly of the city, determined to expose them. As we infiltrated one of their gatherings, we discovered the truth about their twisted obsession with the occult. They were not just seeking power, they were trying to summon something beyond human comprehension. Something that would grant them unimaginable abilities at a terrible cost. In a climactic showdown, we disrupted their ritual, causing chaos and confusion among the hooded figures. But as the room descended into pandemonium, the air crackled with supernatural energy, and a vortex of darkness formed at the center. A horrifying entity emerged from the swirling abyss, its form shifting and indescribable. It was a being of pure malevolence, and it turned its malevolent gaze toward the members of the Eldritch Covenant, their faces contorted in terror. As the entity exacted its terrible vengeance upon them, we fled in horror, barely escaping with our lives. But the entity did not stop there. It pursued us relentlessly, its relentless pursuit, pushing us to the brink of madness. In a final, shocking twist, we realized that the entity sought not only the Covenant, but also us, those who had disrupted its summoning. It hungered for our souls, and it would not rest until it had claimed them. The nightmarish pursuit continues, and as I write these words, I can feel its presence drawing nearer. The horrors of that night in the alley were just the beginning, and now there is no escape. We are forever entwined with the eldritch terror we unleashed, and our fates are sealed in darkness.